looks like we need to be alert about vulnerable anesthesia devices.
Joe, I think you have an interesting story about anesthesia devices that you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, so GE has a couple anesthesia devices, the Estiva and Aspire device, and a group of researchers, CyberMDX, found that they basically have no authentication whatsoever. So anybody who gets on the network, so the internal hospital network, if these devices are connected to a network, they can basically get into the anesthesia device and start making changes. If an adversary can get into the hospital's network, they can make their way into these devices, then there's a real severe set of things that they could affect with these devices. You know, anesthesia is a pretty elaborate science, and based on body composition and age and weight and all kinds of, there's different levels. So you can, in this software, you can change those levels, which is crazy that someone could get in and do that. And then you can change all the timestamps. So, any timestamp that's used for audits or for records, to see how long, each level was at, you can change all that. So a kind of a really eye-opening level of penetration that can happen with this vulnerability. And then another interesting thing is that GE kind of downplays it and says, well, we're not patching it necessarily, just don't connect it to the network.
Right, which sometimes is not the best defense, because these networks can be compromised easily.
Right, but I mean, just to think that the solution is to not connect to the network, I mean, that's basically you're taking a modern advanced technology and bringing it back 30 years, and they say if you do connect to a network, use a secure prompt system, which who knows what that is, no recommendations. So, and then also GE says that anything with software after 2009 disables the ability to modify the gas composition. So I guess that's, there's some level of upgrade there. No patch, some upgrade.
So I'm glad to hear Joe mentioned that there were already a lot of researchers, and I think he mentioned CERT was issuing guidelines and policies.
So CERT put out a standards that said, all the policies and guidelines for these devices. So definitely seen some response in terms of how this kind of device should be used, whether this is above board or not. GE also put out some policies and best practices, and just interesting. We don't talk about medical devices very often, but I think it's pretty clear that vulnerabilities and protection from adversaries is pretty well universal now, and you have to keep your eye open for this stuff in every area. So
yes, it's definitely very scary if somebody was able to compromise these. And actually, I would say if I think about compromises in general, like major ones over the last 5 years or so, most of them have happened by penetrating like a weaker device on the network,
right,
and then propagating to the more important devices out there. But I'm glad that security researchers are doing this research, because that's kind of what uncovers these type of implementation issues, or at least gets the conversation started.
Yeah.
Some of these devices might not have the capability to have some of these things implemented, like security-wise, but at least knowing that those are issues, and then working towards policies and standards for figuring out like how should devices like this operate in the future.
Right.
I think that's a good place for us to be.
It's one of those things that's interesting and unique and research until someone exploits it. When someone exploits something like this, it's headlines, it's, oh my God, I can't believe anybody ever did this. But when we're at this stage where it's, an interesting research activity, it's still something that can be fixed and addressed, Any thoughts on this, Jaime?
I also agree that if you're not going to use that device in terms of don't connect it to the network, right? Like if you don't need it to exchange data with other devices, or if you're not using the functionality at all, I don't see why you would like to connect, that type of device to the network. So, always think about that before you put these type of devices, because, I always have conversations with CISOs and, security professionals that work for hospitals and other places. And when I, when I talk to them and they are like, well, people tell us, just keep devices up to date and apply patches. But then they look at me and it's like, do you really believe we can do that, right? Like these devices may not have, updates for the last 10 years. And, there is no, I cannot even scan for vulnerabilities, right? Because I may affect how those devices, work just by, opening a port in that device. So they need to be super careful when they are scanning for that. And as I said, they may not even have patches for those vulnerabilities. So I think the best thing to do is don't connect it to the network if you don't need to, right?
Agreed.
If you don't need to connect a device this sensitive to the network, maybe you can avoid plugging it into a cart and connecting it to your local network.